Okay, everybody, good evening. Now we're going to start tonight on the second Siman of Shulhan Arukh. We did last week we did Siman Aleph. Tonight we're going to try to do Siman Bet and Gimel. And actually, it's good that we have a smaller crowd. Some of this content is for PG-13 audiences only. So the Siman Bet and Siman Gimel speak about things which are not what we think of as strictly halachic topics related to getting up in the morning like last week, but topics that are very physical in their, such as how we get dressed in the morning and how we use the bathroom. Two things which are not frequently thought of as halachic subjects. So we're going to see what the Halakha has to say about them. And as we start with Siman Bet, in the Shulhan Arukh, which is your first sheet, Sa'if Aleph, as we said, the Shulhan Arukh is divided into 4 sections. This is the section Orah Hayyim, the way of life, which deals with daily issues. It's the second Siman, because the sections are called Simanim, and the individual halachot are called Se'ifim, not halachot. In the Rambam, there are Perakim and halachot. In the Shulchan Aruch, there are Simanim and Seifim. So it's Siman Bet, Saif Aleph says, Lo yilbash chaluko miyushav, which means, when a person gets dressed, they shouldn't sit up. Why? What does that mean they shouldn't sit up? Because in those days, people did not sleep in a state of, with pajamas. They slept naked. So therefore, to sit up in bed means you're sitting there naked, and then you start getting dressed. And so the halakha is a person should try to be dressed in a modest way. Now, some of these halachot don't strictly apply to us today because culturally, most people in our culture sleep with some kind of pajamas. Most people do not sleep naked, although some people may. He says the person should start putting on their clothes while they're still lying down. The reason being, again, that they're still under the blanket, basically. So that way they're not totally coming out in an immodest way from their bed. Therefore, when he gets out of bed, he's covered. In other words, if you're wearing pajamas, this wouldn't really apply to you, because if you're wearing pajamas, then when you come out of bed, you're wearing pajamas. And you can get undressed one piece at a time and be very modest. But if a person is lying in bed and they don't have clothes on and they just throw the blanket off and they jump up, so it's considered immodest. And as he explains in Saif Bet, he says, Al yomar hineni b'chadre chadarim mi ro'eni. So you might say, well, why do I need to care about that? Who's in my bedroom that's watching me, that cares if I am unclothed or not? What difference does it make? The answer is, Ki HaKadosh Baruch Hu milo chol haaretz kevodo. Because HaKadosh Baruch Hu, a person should feel the presence of God, as we said last week in the first Siman of Shulchan Aruch. A person should be aware of God's presence all the time. So just like a person would feel incomplete, or would feel that it was inappropriate to stand unclothed in the presence of a great king, or to stand unclothed in the synagogue, psychologically they would feel that way. In other words, really in God's eyes, does it matter if you're naked or clothed? No, of course not. It doesn't matter. He created Adam and Chava naked. They didn't have clothes. So it shouldn't really matter. But from our perspective, in other words, the purpose of halakha is not to make sure God isn't offended by our immodesty. The purpose of the halakha is to make sure that we have an awareness of God. And to have an awareness of God means you can't walk around immodestly. Not because God is going to be offended, but because that's a sign that you are not really fully attuned to the presence of God. Because if you were, you wouldn't feel comfortable being in that state of undress. And so therefore, being modest all the time is not so you don't offend other people. It's so that you maintain a certain awareness of God that is a heightened awareness. Yes?
So does the Machaber think God is literally present?
No, of course not. God forbid. I mean, God is literally present in the universe. He exists, and He exists. No, the Shulchan Aruch is going with is certainly a Maimonidean in terms of theology. He's going to believe that God is transcendent, but Melo chol haaretz kevodo, His glory fills the universe, which means that a person should be constantly cognizant of God. So God is not more in one place than another, of course. So yidakdek b'chaluko lelovsho kedarko shelo yapoch hapnimi lachutz. This is amazing. I love this halakha. Okay, it means don't wear your clothes inside out, man. Okay, it sounds like that should just be practical advice, but it's a halakha. How many times have you seen somebody that by accident, somebody accidentally? No, that's what it means. Yeah, because exactly. It says a Talmid Chacham. So the Bet Yosef brings a commentary that the Talmid. What's the definition of a Talmid Chacham? A person who makes sure that his clothes are not inside out. In other words, a person has to have a certain sense of self-respect, What does it mean if you go out with your clothes inside out? It means you're not paying attention to exactly. You're not paying attention to your appearance. You don't have a sense of dignity. So you go out with the tag sticking out, and you forgot to cut the price tag off, and you don't look right. So for a person who has a sense of self-respect, they're going to make sure that the shirt is on right. Yes. Did you have a practical? You like to wear your clothes inside out?
Only linguistic question.
Maybe
I have yidakdik. The short.
Yidakdik. You should be careful. Dikduk. Be careful. Yeah. Dak means something very fine. Okay. So lidakdik is a doubling of that. Okay. We don't have four letter. According to most of the grammarians, you don't have 4-letter roots in Hebrew. So dikduk is actually from the same as dok or dak, which is to be fine or precise. So lidakdik, like midakdik b'mitzvot, is also used. Somebody who's very precise about the mitzvot. Okay. So what he means is you should be careful where you don't wear your clothes inside out. You might think that it's insignificant. It's just a practical thing. You don't want to look like a loser. It's uncool. But it's more than that, guys. Really, if you wear your clothes inside out, it's a disrespect to yourself. Because you're not presenting the most dignified image, and it's proper for a person to behave in a way that reflects positively on themselves, and that's why it says a Talmid Chacham especially has to make sure that his clothes are clean, his clothes are properly not inside out, and so on. Because and same for any Jew, that when a Jew dresses in a way that shows disregard for his appearance, and he lets himself go, it doesn't reflect well on Kadosh Baruch Hu either, because you're a representative of Hashem. A person looks at a guy who hasn't washed his shirt in the past since the last Shemitah, and they say this is a representative of Hashem. I don't want any part of that. And that's unfortunately, that's what happens. Or that the worst is during the Tishat Hayyim, during the 9 days of Tisha B'Av, the many Hasidim, they don't take a shower, and then they it's.
But they don't take a shower anyways.
They take a shower once a week, whether they need it or not. Yeah. So next halakha. Now, what did you want to say?
I once wrote in Israel. There's I don't know if you know the 400 bus between your Shulhan and Orah.
Sure.
I wrote it on the 9 days.
Yeah. So you got a kaparat avonot for that. Okay. So now, if Dalet yinal min al yamin techila. A person should put their right shoe on first. This is not the hokey pokey. But you put your right shoe on first. Velo yikshirenu, and not tie it. Now this is obviously talking only about shoes that tie. Shoes that don't tie, the tying doesn't apply. A person put their right shoe on first. Velo yikshirenu v'achar kach yinal shel simol. Then he puts on the left shoe, v'yikshirenu, and he ties the left shoe, v'yachzor v'yikshor shel yamin. We're going to see in a second where this comes from. So according to the Shulhan Arukh, which is also what the Torah says, a person puts their right shoe on first, then their left shoe, then they tie the left, and then they tie the right. So they put on right, put on left, tie right. That's only if, number one, you're wearing shoes that have laces, and number two, you actually untie them and retie them each time you put them on. Some people, like for example, Ari tonight is wearing shoes that do not have any laces, so therefore he would just put his right shoe on and then his left shoe, and there would be no tying. I am not typical. I rarely untie and retie my shoes unless they become untied. At least my regular walking shoes, so I just slip them on. So for me, also, it's not applicable unless I'm actually tying it. Now we're going to see in a minute where this comes from, because we're going to look at the Bet Yosef. This is not Kabbalah. This is not Kabbalah. This is in Masechet Shabbat. This is in the Gemara. This is in the Talmud. It's absolutely not Kabbalah. People think that, but it's actually from the Talmud. We're going to see why. Yeah. So what does the Rama say? Uva minalim shelanu. The Rama, who is the Ashkenazic posek, who is featured in the Shulchan Aruch. His glosses are featured in the Shulchan Aruch, and he lived in Poland. He says, our shoes. Apparently, they wore shoes like Ari. She'en lehem kashira. They don't have any laces. If they wore some kind of slip-on shoes. So all we do is we put on the right shoe first, and then the left shoe. It is a famous halakha, but many people think it's Kabbalistic. It's not Kabbalistic. It's actually right from the Gemara. So if when a person removes his shoes, choletz shel simol techila. So you remove the left shoe first. Now, the reason given for this, well, we're going to see a little bit of the reason, but basically the logic is the same. That just like you give precedence to the right shoe, if you're giving precedence to the right foot, that means that you don't want to have the right shoe without a shoe, the right foot without a shoe, and the left foot with a shoe. So therefore, it's similar to when you when you put on, we can give a lot of examples, but without getting into imperfect analogies. But basically, since you put the right shoe on first and then the left shoe, that means you don't want to ever have the right shoe unshoed, so to speak, the right foot unshoed with the left foot having a shoe. So therefore, when you take them off, you reverse the order. We'll see more in a moment. Seif Vav, Asur lelech bekomaz zekufa. A person should not walk proudly with a straight back. In other words, walking in what's considered to be an arrogant posture. He walks like in a kingly way, like he thinks he's the king of the world. He shouldn't walk like that. And he shouldn't walk 4 amot with his head uncovered. This is the source for the kippah. By the way, this is the source for the kippah. There's one other place that the Shulhan Arukh does mention the kippah, which is when talks about berachot and making sure that one's head is covered when they say the name of Hashem. But it says he shouldn't go 4 amot with Gilui HaRosh. Let's just finish the halakha first. And what does the Ramah say in parentheses? Mipnei kivod HaShekhinah, because of the respect for the divine presence. V'yivdok nikavav, and a person should be careful. This is another halakha that people don't realize it's a halakha. They know it as a practical matter, but they don't know it's halakha. It says, always make sure if you have to go to the bathroom before you go out. Isn't that wouldn't it be great if everybody followed this halakha? Not just Jews, not just religious Jews, but everybody always made sure, so they weren't, 20 minutes into a trip and said, I need to stop, I need to go to the bathroom. They should always check if you need to go to the bathroom before you go out. And we tell our children this, of course, from the youngest age, as soon as they're potty trained, we tell them, make sure to check if you have to go to the bathroom before you go out. And it's halakha. It's halakha. And what does the Rama end? Hagah, he says, V'chaseh kol gufo, a person should be covered up, their body should be covered. In other words, they should dress in a way that's not overly revealing of their body. V'lo yelech yachef, they shouldn't walk around barefoot, they should have something on their feet as well. V'yargil atzmo lipanot boker va'erev, a person should accustom themselves to use the restroom in the evening and in the morning. Shu zerizut unukiyut, because this is something which is considered zerizut, is considered to be what's the best word for zariz? Is a person who has what? Alacrity is the English word that they use, but zealous is a stronger word than what it means. They say having alacrity, but being on top of things. I mean, I would say the best word for it is what? Yeah, it means like being on top of things. Be on top of things. V'yizdarez means to be on top of something. We would say in English. That would be the idiom. In other words, when a person's on top of things, they take care of this. So they should make sure, and nikiyut, it's also cleanliness and health, that they don't hold in when they have to go to the bathroom. In other words, they have a regular pattern of using the bathroom, and this is the healthiest thing for a person. Now, all of these halachot. So what did you want to say, Ari? I know you had your hand up, and I don't want to hold you back for too long. Go ahead.
Well,
what was your?
Say that when kippah is a minhag.
It is.
So are there halachot?
He doesn't say asur lelech b'daled amot b'gilui HaRosh, does he? He says, Asur lelech bekomaz zekufa, a person is prohibited to walk in an arrogant posture as if he rules the world. And it says, V'lo yelech daled amot b'gilui HaRosh. A person shouldn't. It doesn't say va'asur. It doesn't say va'asur lelech daled amot b'gilui HaRosh, because everybody agrees it's not an isur.
So
in other words, it's not a prohibition.
It's a standardized lashon.
The language is precise. Yeah. Otherwise, he would have said.
So asur is that's halakha. And
if he wanted to say asur, right? If he wanted to say both, he would have said asur lelech bekomaz zekufa. O lalechet daled amot b'gilui HaRosh. He would have made it one sentence. The fact that he says v'lo yelech daled amot b'gilui HaRosh, saying a separate thing. It's together with v'yivdok nikavav. Nobody's going to say that if you forgot to check if you went to had to go to the bathroom before you left. Oh, it's asur to leave the house before you check if you have to go to the bathroom. It's not a halachic prohibition, but it's considered to be a custom. It's based upon the Gemara that talks about the Chachamim being very careful to cover their heads before they walk Daled Amot, which was Midat Chasidut, basically. It's considered Midat Chasidut. It's considered to be a meritorious sign of piety. It's not nowadays. It's a custom that everybody accepted upon themselves. In the times of the Gemara, it was something that was considered Midat Chasidut. The act of a pious person. And the Shulhan Arukh will mention later, God willing, one day we'll get there, when he talks about berachot and mentioning God's name, that one shouldn't say Hashem's name. That some say that it's halachically prohibited to say Hashem's name without the head covered. So obviously, there you have a halachic issue, saying Hashem's name. But walking without a kippah, everybody agrees it's a minhag, and not. I should say. The predominant view is that it's a minhag.
But when the Chaver says asur, that always indicates
asur means it's prohibited halachically.
And it's standardized throughout the whole Shulhan.
Yeah, I would say. I mean, it doesn't necessarily mean on the same level. It could be deoraita, it could be derabanan,
Right.
could be because of sakana. Usually he'll tell you if it's because of sakana. I mean, usually the language will indicate that. We'll see. So this is the Shulchan Aruch. So we have the basic idea. Now, when you turn the page to the second page, not the back of the first page, but the second page. So what I have here is like what I had last time. These are from the Bet Yosef. And as we mentioned in the first class, the Bet Yosef is the commentary of the same author as the Shulchan Aruch, Rav Yosef Karo, commenting on an earlier work called the Tur. He wrote a voluminous commentary, and then from that voluminous commentary, which is really, I mean, it's enormous, he summarized it into the Shulchan Aruch. He summarized the conclusions into the Shulchan Aruch. So in order, sometimes it's helpful to take a look at what he has to say in the Bet Yosef, although we don't have to go through every piece, just in order to get a sense for what the sources are from which he's getting these halachot. Now, one thing that's important to know is that the Rambam, who is our other main source of halakha and is featured on the back of this page, if you take a look at the back of page 2, in other words, the last page where it says halakha vav and halakha zayin, you will see that he mentions some of these things. So, for example, in halakha vav, he says, Tzniut gedola nohagim talmidei chachamim ba'atzman, that talmidei chachamim practice a great modesty with themselves. That velo yitgalu roshan, velo gufan, they don't uncover their heads or their bodies. So this is talking about talmidei chachamim. He doesn't say that everybody on the street, every average Joe has to do that. He says talmidei chachamim do that. Even when he goes to the bathroom, as we're going to see in the next section of the Shulchan Aruch, he should be very modest. Okay, and the rest of this halakha we're going to see applies more to Siman Bet of the Shulchan Aruch. So let's skip down for just 1 second to the third halakha on this page where it says halakha chet. So he says Lo yelech talmid chacham b'koma zekufa v'garon natoi. A talmid chacham shouldn't walk with a straightened back in an arrogant posture, or with his throat extended out, with his head held high, as if he's on top of the world. Like it says, I believe that's in Sefer Yeshayahu, about how the women would walk with a very arrogant posture. He shouldn't walk. Akev b'tzad godel means that he walks like in a very benachat, kimo anashim v'gasei ruach. He shouldn't walk like royalty, taking his sweet time to get anywhere, with very steps. Where what it means is his ankle is even with his big toe, which means that his feet never move that far apart from each other. He takes small steps. He's really, he's like walking the red carpet or something like that. He shouldn't conduct himself in this way.
Like a model walk.
Yeah, like a model, exactly. Like a model. Yeah. V'gasei ruach, or like the arrogant people. That's the same thing. It's the same. It's also from Yeshayahu describing the women, the arrogance of the women. So, what is the point? The point is making a spectacle of yourself. You think you're a hotshot. You want everybody to pay attention to you. That's why you're walking so slowly. That's why models walk slowly, because they want people to pay attention to them. So, saying you shouldn't do that. Now, obviously, these things that he's describing here are very similar to what we see in Siman Aleph about being modest. And he says, you shouldn't run in the Reshut Harabim, in the public area, like crazy people run around. He says that he shouldn't also walk in a fashion which is bent over. He shouldn't walk like a hunchback either. In other words, true, he doesn't have to walk in a very arrogant fashion, but he also doesn't have to walk like he's a 1,000 years old, like he's the 1,000-year-old hermit that lives in a cave. That's also an extreme. So what should he do? He says that a person should walk in a humble way, with his head down, looking ahead of him, but with his head, not looking around like he's a big shot and everybody should be looking at him, but looking straight ahead like somebody who's walking like somebody who's busy and has something to do. That it's clear from a person's walk, the way that he walks, whether he's a Talmid Chacham or a fool. You can tell from his posture, from the way that he carries himself. And that's what Solomon said in his wisdom. That even in the way that the fool walks, he tells everybody, I'm a fool. In other words, you can tell from the way a person carries himself, which means to say, "Hu modia lakol al atzmo shu sachal." He tells everybody about himself, "I'm a fool." So the Rambam is speaking in the same vein as the Shulchan Aruch here about being modest. And then he says in the next halakha, "Malbush talmid chacham malbush na'eh v'naki," that the talmid chacham's clothing should be clean and proper. He shouldn't be having stains on his clothing or food that he dripped on his clothing because he doesn't know how to eat or anything like that. He shouldn't wear the flashiest clothing. He doesn't have to wear flashy clothing. He shouldn't wear poor clothing that insults the one who wears it. In other words, he shouldn't denigrate himself with the way he dresses. He should wear middle of the road, normal, nice clothing. He shouldn't wear sheer clothing that everybody can see through to his body. He doesn't have to look like Fabio or something, okay? Even if he looks like Fabio. Like they make the very thin linen that you can see right through. I don't know about that. If they do that now, I highly doubt that in Mitzrayim now, but I don't know. You shouldn't have these clothing that hangs, that drags on the ground like the train of a wedding gown, or like the royal train that they have. And he says, and similarly, Ela ad akevo, it should go down to his ankle. He shouldn't have clothing that covers over the palms of their hands, because it used to be like it says ketonet pasim for Yosef. One of the interpretations of ketonet pasim is that clothing that covered his hands. Why did it cover his hands? Because he didn't have to work. If you didn't have to work in the field, you had ketonet pasim, means pas yad, it's the hand. Means that the clothing covered his hand, meaning it's a mark of royalty. His father gave him a coat that covered his hands because that meant that he didn't have to work in the fields like his brothers did. Yes?
Is this why a lot of people think that shorts are asur?
Why? Because it shows your body?
Because it doesn't go down your ankle.
In this case, first of all, he's talking about Talmidei Chachamim.
Okay.
He's not saying the average person can't wear shorts.
Okay.
And number two, he's saying that he's contrasting that with people who wear very long trains that are meant to be showy.
Right.
Yeah, so I'm not sure if he would say it has to reach the ankle, or if he's just trying to say if you want to wear something long, it shouldn't go past your ankle and be dragging on the ground so that somebody else has to carry it behind you or something like that. And then he talks about different ways of wearing patches on your clothing and so on. And he says that a person shouldn't go out with the strongest cologne. He should put what he needs to, in order to remove bad odor. So deodorant is good, but heavy cologne maybe not. The point of all of this is modesty. Okay, and now we see in the Rambam that these are somewhat of midat chasidut, somewhat of a guidelines for modesty that are for the Talmidei Chachamim. But the Shulchan Aruch also, you'll notice, the Shulchan Aruch doesn't say that one who doesn't get dressed while they're still in bed in the morning is doing a violation of a biblical commandment. He says, Lo yilbash chalukom yushav, a person shouldn't get totally naked when they get dressed, but rather they should be covered at all times as best they can and dress in the most modest way because they have an awareness that God is before them at all times. That doesn't mean that that it's one of the Taryag mitzvot that you have to do that. It doesn't say anywhere that you're violating a prohibition. What it means is it's proper conduct. That's what he's talking about. And the proper conduct, you can see the Rambam has a very similar vision of proper conduct for the Talmid Chacham. And what the Shulchan Aruch is saying is to incorporate some of this. Now, one of the things that the Rambam doesn't have, which is very interesting, is he does not have this idea about putting on the right shoe first. And maybe you're going to tell me, Ari's going to say, I know why the Rambam doesn't have the thing about the right foot, putting the right shoe, because he didn't like the hokey pokey. Put the right foot in and put the right. He didn't like putting the right foot. That's chukot akum. That's right. No, he said, why did the Rambam not have the right foot and left foot? So you're going to say, I know why Ari's going to say. He's going to say because he doesn't like Kabbalah. It's based on the Kabbalah,
right.
And then the Rambam doesn't like the Kabbalah, so he doesn't have it. That's what you thought, right?
I didn't know the Kabbalah.
Okay, right. So let's take a look at what the real reason is for a second. Yeah, maybe he didn't wear shoes. No, he did. So let's take a look at the Bet Yosef. Actually talks about this problem. So on the sheet of Bet Yosef, which is the second sheet, but the first side, and the second little paragraph there. Now, We can even go before that, the first paragraph. So it says in the parak of Bama Isha Yotzah. This is right out of the Bet Yosef's commentary. That's a parak in Masechet Shabbat that we will one day get to. So this is from Masechet Shabbat. Vot vinan Allah midetanya, that it says in Masechet Shabbat that you should put the right foot on the right shoe first, and then the left shoe. Okay, midetanya says in the Braita Kishu Noel shel yamin tachila. That when you put your shoe on, you should put your right shoe on first. That's in the Gemara. Amar Rav Yosef. So the problem is, Rabbi Yochanan said, which I cut off here, or it's missing from here. Rabbi Yochanan had said that you're supposed to put the left shoe on first. Okay, and he says why? Because tefillin goes on the left arm, and we tie it. So you should tie your left shoe first because of tefillin. And the other rabbi said, no, the right arm and the right foot are always favored, because if you look at when, for example, the Kohanim are dedicated to become Kohanim, where did they anoint them? They anointed them, or they put the blood on their
the right
Yamin, Yad Yamin. And Bon Raglo Yamanit, also on the foot, the big toe of the right foot. So the right side is given precedence. So both are given precedence in different contexts. Okay, or in chalitza also, it's from the yamin. So what is so therefore what did the Gemara say? Since we have a Mishnah one way and we have Rabbi Yochanan the other way, da'avad hachi avad u'da'avad hachi avad. Rav Yosef says whatever you do is fine, one way or the other is fine. That's what he said. Uperushu Tosafot comes along and says, Dilo plige Rabbi Yochanan Obraita. Rabbi Yochanan achi kamar afal gav diyamin chashuva linyan boen yad uboen regel. V'chein linyan chalitza. Yachol linol shel simol techila. Kevan dismol chashuva legabe tefillin. Obraita nami kamashmalan. Afal gav dismol chashuva letefillin. Yachol linol shel yamin techila. Tosafot actually interprets it. What does it mean? It means both are good, because in certain contexts the right side is favored, in certain contexts the left side is favored. So de'avad kemar avad, de'avad kemar avad means whichever way you do it, there's a valid reason. There's a legitimate basis for favoring the right. There's a legitimate basis and a source for favoring the left. So whatever your custom is fine. Amarle Abaye retorts in the Talmud. Dilma Rabbi Yochanan hamatnitin lashmiyale. Maybe Rabbi Yochanan didn't know that Baraita. That's why he said you should put the left first. And if he had known it, he would retract. How do you know? Maybe he would have retracted. Or maybe, if he had heard it, he would have rejected it. So we don't know. We don't know what he would have done. Amar Rav Nachman said, Yireh Shamayim Yotzei Yedei Shetehen. A person who wants to fear God, in other words, somebody who wants to be careful about mitzvot, should do both. How can you do both? You can put the right and left on it simultaneously if you're really talented. What should you do? Answer. Umanu Mar Brei de Ravina used to do it. Techi Avid, what did he do? Sayem Dimbina Velo Qatar. He put on the right shoe and he didn't tie it. V'sayem dismale v'katar. And then he would put on the left side. Then he would put on the right and he would tie it. So the other way around. Right. So he put on the right side and he didn't tie it. Then he put on the left, he tied it. Okay? So, v'hadar katar dimine. And then he went back to the right. So he did put on the right, put on the left and tied the right. Where do we see that? Shulhan Arukh. Correct? That's exactly what Shulhan Arukh said. Does it come from Kabbalah? Nope. Okay. But then we have a very interesting conclusion to this Gemara, my friends. A conclusion that makes the Rambam seem very compelling. Because who's the last voice? The last voice is Rav Ashi. Rav Ashi was the editor of the Gemara. And what did he say? Rav Ashi, Chazina Rav Kahana Dilakapid. I saw Rav Kahana. He didn't care about any of this. That's the last statement in the Gemara. In other words, the what we call the batra, the final voice, halakha. Usually we go like the batra'ah. It says we go like the last person, because he's seen all the previous opinions. So in this case, Rav Ashi says, I saw Rav Kahana, Rabbi Cohen. We would call him if we were alive today. Rav Kahana, he was a Kohen. I saw Rav Kahana. He wasn't makpid. He put on whatever. He didn't care left, right, tying, not tying. So therefore, the Bet Yosef is going to say, "V'Rabbeinu katav ki Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, Yiresh de'amar Yiresh Shamayim Yotzei Yedei Shetehen," that the Tur, which the Bet Yosef, remember, is a commentary on the Tur. So he's talking about the Tur. He says the Tur, unlike the Gemara's seeming conclusion, In other words, if you were just reading that Gemara, the last word was Rav Ashi, he said, I don't care about what foot you put it on. Okay, that's what the Rambam has. But the Tur is actually the problem, not the Rambam, because the Tur is going back one step and saying we should go like Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, and we should be caring about the order of putting on the shoes. So what does he say? He says, Avala poskim ishmitu dinze. None of the poskim, not just the Rambam, none of the poskei halakha known to the Beit Yosef had codified this as a halakha. V'nir'a li shehata'am mishum disvialu udalakha k'Rav Yosef da'amar da'avad hachi avad u'davar hachi avad. There are two opinions in the Talmud in this very piece, both of which say it doesn't matter. The first was Rav Yosef, who said whichever way you do it is fine. Although that would kind of imply that you should be consistent one way or the other. Right? Because saying avad kemar avad means you should follow one way or the other, but either way is fine. And then Rav Ashi comes along and says, Rav Kahana doesn't care about this at all, implying that you don't need to care about it at all. And so therefore, umashma de Rav Ashi nami ki Rav Kahana sviralei. The implication, of course, is that Rav Ashi agrees with Rav Kahana. That's why he's reporting Rav Kahana and telling you that he didn't care. And therefore, v'kevan de batra'ahu kevatei naktinan. And since we see that he didn't care, and that was the halakha, that's how we go. So he's saying that's why most of the poskim didn't bring this halakha. Not because of Kabbalah or anything else, but because the seeming conclusion of the Gemara is that it doesn't matter. And he says, "Ve'afshar shemitam ze yishmitu gam ken hadetanya hatam perek bama isha yotzaa kishu choletz shel simol v'achar kach choletz shel yamin." Similarly, later on in the Gemara, it talks about removing the left shoe before the right shoe. And we don't have any argument over there later on in the Gemara about removing the shoes. It seems like everybody agrees you should remove the left shoe. In other words, that they interpret it that later on it's telling you you can take off the left shoe first, or you could take off the right shoe first. It doesn't matter. Okay, that's the way that most of the poskim are learning it. So that's why most of the Sifrei Halakha, other than the Tur, did not bring this halakha of putting on the right shoe first. They didn't bring the halakha that you have to tie the left shoe first. They didn't bring the halakha that you have to take off the left shoe first. They didn't bring any of it because they understood that these halachot are all connected. And since Rav Ashi said that that Rav Kahana didn't care about putting on the shoes in any specific order, it was voluntary. So too with taking off the shoes is voluntary. Aval Rabbeinu. But he says that that our teacher, meaning the Tur, is who holds that you have to put on shoes in a certain order, doesn't mention the taking off of the shoes. So he has a problem with everybody, right? All the other poskim didn't mention this whole concept of order of shoes at all. The Tur, who does mention the order of putting on shoes, doesn't mention the order of taking off shoes, and therefore the Beit Yosef concludes in the end that we should be consistent, and if we're going to put on shoes according to the order that's specified by Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, then we should also remove the shoes according to the order that's specified in the Talmud, which is the left shoe before the right shoe. Okay, so that's how he comes with his conclusion. So no, he's agreeing with the Torah, but he's taking it a step further because he says that the Rabbeinu Yonah actually in Sefer Yirah does say that you should take the left shoe off first. So in other words, there are Rishonim that hold like Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak with regard to putting on shoes, and like the Gemara with regard to taking them off. So since we're going to be consistent here and follow the order in terms of putting them on, we should also follow the order that the Gemara specifies in terms of taking them off, and say that you have to take the left shoe off first.
And Torah said right.
The Torah had mentioned the putting on, but he never mentioned the issue of taking the left shoe off first.
He said right, left, tie,
right, left, tie, left, tie, right. But then he never mentioned taking off the left.
But why?
So some of the Mefarshim say,
why did you go right, left, right instead of left, right, left?
Because that's what the Gemara says. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak said, put on the right shoe first, put on the left shoe, tie it. But that was the one that was the defining opinion, the compromise opinion in the Gemara was Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, who said, let's combine these into one thing that satisfies everybody. And then Rav Ashi comes along and says, this whole thing, you don't have to do it at all. So the question is, how far do you take that? Does that include also, it doesn't matter how you take off your shoes either? Right? So the Rambam doesn't mention it at all, and neither do most of the poskim except for Rabbeinu Yonah. So that implies that really none of them held that was halakha. But the Tur does hold that putting on the shoes according to a certain order is halakha. He doesn't mention the taking off of the shoes, but the Beit Yosef says, listen, that either we can understand that he meant it by implication, that since you're putting the right shoe on first,
Take it off.
then you should also take the left shoe off first, because the right shoe shouldn't be unshoed. The right foot shouldn't be unshoed with the left foot, before the left foot is. Or it could be that he thought that it's not necessary to go that far, and once you've already given precedence in the putting on, you don't need to go as far as the taking off. Either way, in the end, the Shulhan Arukh says, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it, and we're going to talk about the putting on and the taking off. But does it have to do with Kabbalah? Not at all. It has nothing to do with Kabbalah at all. Yes.
But by honoring both, you're not really honoring either.
So the Beit Yosef asked the question. You're right. Really, by putting on the first shoe and then putting on the left shoe and then tying the left shoe, tying the right shoe, you're not getting anybody. Because you didn't fully put on the right shoe. And you didn't put on the left shoe first. You put it on second. So you tied it first, a big deal. So how does that work? So he explains, he says, because there's a difference between the view that says you should give precedence to the right side versus the left side. Because the right side said you should give precedence based on the Avodah and the Beit HaMikdash. So just putting on the shoe is enough to show that you're giving precedence to the right. But what was the basis for giving precedence to the left? Tefillin. And what do you do with tefillin? Tying. So according to the one that said the left side was supposed to get precedence, that was expressed in tying. So basically the putting on, you're doing the right. But the tying, you're doing the left. And that way you really show precedence for both of them.
But the Kohanim would take off their shoes.
That's true. But I'm saying the assignment of significance to that part of the body. It's on one side. So that is the halakha, and that is what we get from this first siman. From the second siman of Shulchan Aruch. And now let's just do a little bit into the third siman of Shulchan Aruch, which I had hoped to finish, but I'm not sure we're going to get to the end of it today. We may not. Anyway, so Sa'if Aleph. This is a remarkable thing. It's mentioned in the Talmud. This is not it's mentioned in Masechet Berachot in the ninth. I think it's in the ninth parak. I want to say that when a person goes into the Bet HaKisei, when he goes into the bathroom, before he enters, he says a prayer. Hitkabedu mechubadim. Now, if you want to see the whole prayer, it's actually in the Rambam, believe it or not. You'll say, the Rambam is not a Kabbalist. Why is he talking to Malachim when you go to the bathroom?
Yeah.
So look at the last page. Believe it or not, the Rambam has it. What is it? The last page, Halakha on that page of Rambam. Halakha hey. This is not taken from the same place as these other halachot. The halachot on the top of the page were taken from Hilchot Deot, about character. And these last halachot are taken from Hilchot Tefillah, where he talks about the Birchot HaShachar. And what does he say? Anytime a person goes into the bathroom, Omer kodem shikanes, before he goes in, he should say, Hitkabedu mechubadim kidoshim. Be honored, holy, respected ones. Who are you talking to? The Malachim. Misharte Elyon, servants of the Most High. Shimruni ad she'ekanes ve'eteh. Watch over me while I go in and come out. Meaning, can you watch the door for me while I go in the bathroom? Keep a lookout for me. Ki zeh darkan shel bnei adam. That's part of the prayer, because this is the way of man. Meaning, I'm a human being. I have no. When you go in the bathroom, you're acknowledging your humanity. That's right. You're acknowledging your humanity. We don't think about it that way. But the thing, if you want, you could be intensely involved in doing the most spiritual thing. But when you have to go to the bathroom, you got to go to the bathroom. That's it. Right? You are a human being. That's when you remember, I'm a physical body. It doesn't matter. You could go without eating for a long time. But without going to the bathroom? Nope, can't do it. And it's frustrating sometimes when you're in the middle of something, you just don't have a choice. What they say, nature calls. So, you say to the Malachim, thank you very much for being with me, Hashem. Or thank you very much for being with me, Malachim. But I have to go to the bathroom. I'm a human being, I have no choice. I have to go. So, and when he comes out, and this is Asher Yatzar. We know we say Asher Yatzar when you come in. What we're not familiar with, when you come out of the bathroom saying Asher Yatzar, everybody knows you say the blessing of Asher Yatzar. But nobody knows about this idea that before you go in, you're supposed to tell the Malachim, please wait for me while I go and use the bathroom. It's like in the beginning of this week's parasha, when Avraham says, Al Nat Tavor, when he says, according to the interpretation of Rashi, he's talking to Hashem. And he says, please wait for me while I go greet these visitors, right? So too, you're saying to the Malachim, please wait for me and guard me. I have to go into the bathroom.
You're saying guard me, or you're saying don't come in?
Shimruni, guard me. garden. In other words,
Why do you say
you realize that when you go in the bathroom, it's the one place that you can't think about the Torah. You're not allowed to think about Torah in the bathroom. You're not allowed to. There's nothing spiritual you can do in the bathroom. There's a midrash that says that when David HaMelech went into the Beit HaMerchatz, even when he would go into the bathhouse, he would be crying. He would be sad because he had no mitzvot, no tzitzit, no tefillin, no reminder of God, and then he remembered the Brit Milah. Right? That's all you have. When you're in the bathroom, there's nothing to connect you to God. You have nothing. Alright? You can't. So that's why you say to the Malachim. But why are you saying it to the Malachim? You're not saying it to the Malachim because there's really, Casper the Friendly Ghost watching outside the door. That's not the reason. Again, the same as with all of the halachot that we have here. The point of it is that you should recognize the significance of your going to the bathroom. And we recognize the significance of our going to the bathroom in two ways. One is after we've gone to the bathroom, we recognize the significance of it by thanking God for having a functioning plumbing. But before you go in, you recognize the significance of going into the bathroom, that you know what? I'm a mortal being. And when I have to go to the bathroom, I remove myself from the spirituality. It's over for temporarily. And I have to say, please hold on for me, I'm going to be back. That reminds us that we're human beings. It's an amazing thing. So the Shulchan Arukh though says that you say this prayer, so don't say to yourself, how come my kindergarten teacher didn't tell me about this prayer that I'm supposed to say before the bathroom? I only know about the one when I come out of the bathroom. And I never saw any posters at the bathroom like that, the Asher Yatzar poster, right? I never saw a poster. Why not? Because the custom is not to say it anymore. Okay? Asher Yatzar for sure. Yeah, Asher Yatzar, yeah, but he's talking about the one before you go in. Before you go in, that he talks about Asher Yatzar in a later Siman. So he's not talking about that yet. This prayer it's not customary to say the pre-bathroom prayer of wait for me, Malachim, while I run into the bathroom. And we're going to see why that is. One, you might have to theorize a little bit, okay? Now look at here. Isn't this interesting? The Rambam, your non-Kabbalistic rational person, is the one that says you ask a malachim to wait for you when you go in the bathroom. And the Bet Yosef, who's the Mekubal, says, no, we don't say it. What are you going to do with that, Ari? You're going to have trouble with that. Okay, so let's go to Seif Bet. Seif Bet, Yetzanua bebet hakisei. It just shows you it's not so simple, this whole distinction. Okay. So even when you go to the bathroom, a person should be modest. He shouldn't uncover himself. Now remember, back then the way that their clothes worked was that they were long like togas. So for the person could sit down in the bathroom and only then pull up. He didn't have to be unclothed more than necessary, and they could cover themselves partially while they were going to the bathroom because of the nature of the clothes that they had. So you have to keep that in mind. So he says, don't unclothe yourself right away. Haga, the Rama adds, V'lo yelechu shnei anashim biyachad. Two men should not go to the bathroom together. It's not a social opportunity, right? Oh, that's the opposite, by the way. The Gemara says girls are supposed to go to the bathroom together. It says Hitkinu Chachamim. The Chachamim made a takana that women should go misaprot and they should talk together in the bathroom. Why? So the men wouldn't come in; they would hear them. So they wouldn't end up being secluded or walked in on by men because they didn't necessarily have men's bathroom and women's bathroom. So that it's actually a takana they're supposed to do. So, yeah. And he shouldn't talk in the bathroom. And he should close the door behind him. Okay, I know that seems like a no-brainer, but every once in a while people forget to do that. Close the door when you go to the bathroom, please, and don't talk in the bathroom. It's not a place to socialize. No, everybody agrees on that, actually. Yeah, the Bet Yosef actually brings it later in his commentary. He just doesn't mention it here. Yeah.
What's Seif for real?
He mentions it. What?
What's Seif for real?
Seif Gimel. Now here we get to a little bit of graphic detail about going to the bathroom. Apparently sometimes in order to facilitate elimination, when they would go to the bathroom, they would massage their underside in order to facilitate that. And he says, don't use if you want to use a rock, o bekesam, liftoch nikavav, yimashmish kodem sheshev. He says that a person shouldn't do this kind of opening of the orifices to get things moving, okay, with a piece of wood or a piece of rock or whatever they would use, while he should do it before he sits down and not after he sits down, because it makes him vulnerable to witchcraft, kishafim. Now it happens to be that every time that the Shulhan Arukh talks about kishafim, we can understand it in a modern way as well, that it means that they found it made the person vulnerable to harm of some sort. Probably physical harm. Probably physical harm, of some sort. Probably that was more sanitary to do it that way. Now for them, they noticed that a person who would do it the other way would get sick. And they would wonder why. And they would say, obviously it made him vulnerable that he had that bad habit and bad things happened to him. Now we can just call that... Most of the things that are... even the commentaries on the Torah mention, and we're talking about the older commentaries on the Torah mention, that every time something says it's prohibited because of kshafim, it also means sakana. In other words, somehow it was a dangerous thing, probably for sanitary reasons, and you have to keep in mind, they didn't have a clue about the germ theory, about the transmission of disease. They didn't know. They knew that fecal matter was unpleasant to be around, but they didn't realize that it was festering germs and all that. They didn't know. So when they noticed that people with certain bathroom habits would get sick or bad things would happen to them physically, they speculated that it had something to do with that. But they didn't have a model for understanding. They didn't have Louis Pasteur to tell them exactly how. And remember, even in his time, Louis Pasteur was considered a crank in the beginning. Nobody believed him. They thought that he was making up stories about these little germs, spreading disease, and so it was unheard of back then. They didn't know. So anyway, but they knew that it was bad for you. Basically, what it says is you should only uncover yourself in the bathroom the bare minimum that you have to. So he says, in front of you, 2 tefachim. A tefach is the width of a hand, approximately, let's say 4 inches, approximately. And behind himself, 1 tefach. And for a woman, behind herself a tefach, and in front of her she doesn't need to uncover herself because that's not the way that her anatomy works. Okay? So basically what is the principle here? It's not so much about a technical halakha as about one, even when they're going to the bathroom, should be modest. Okay? Try to maintain one's modesty in the bathroom. And on the same concept, if you have to go to the bathroom in an open place, which once in a while people have to do, for emergencies, it doesn't have any walls, and so therefore you're exposed to the open air and open passersby. A person should face north or south. Now again, you're going to tell me what kind of weird Kabbalistic thing is this, north or south? It's not Kabbalistic either. He shouldn't face east or west.
So it won't face the Har HaBayit.
Right, because that's the Beit HaMikdash.
You're not allowed to build a bathroom
facing the Har HaBayit, correct. Right. That's right. That's the halakha. And it's a halakha from the Talmud. The Rambam has it in Hilchot Beit HaBechira. The Rambam has the halakha that a person should not go to the bathroom and should not make a bathroom facing the east-west. Well, for us, that's facing the Har HaBayit. Now, there's a bit of
the Shekhinah.
The Shekhinah. Right.
So that's saying God is imminent.
There's a machloket.
It is.
No,
that's what it said.
No, what do you mean? Shekhinah is not Hashem. Shekhinah is divine presence. Shekhinah is a verb.
Is it still like that?
Lishkon is Shekhinah is a gerund actually. It means dwelling. It means the act of dwelling. It means the act of being present. But it doesn't mean God Himself. It means His act of manifesting Himself.
Right. Manifesting.
So, manifesting of Himself. Yeah. Of course, everybody agrees on that. But the point is that there is a machloket that the Beit Yosef brings, and he discusses it at length. What is the rule? Is the rule east-west, no matter where you are in the world, or is the rule relative to Har HaBayit? And there's a machloket. In other words, let's say you live in Israel and you're to the north of the Har HaBayit, or you live in a country that's to the north, or north or south of Yerushalayim instead of being east-west. So what should you do then? So there is a discussion. The Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch codify that anywhere in the world, I mean, if you're actually near the Beit HaMikdash, then relative to Har HaBayit is obviously a sensitive issue. But when you are outside of that immediate vicinity, as we're going to see, there the Rambam and the Shulchan Aruch go with the view that east-west is the defining thing. Because it's really a zecher, it's really to make a person aware of the Beit HaMikdash. It's not about the exact direction. So even if you're to the south or north, they would say, seemingly, that really you would still go by east-west. Although there's a machloket about that. In other words, it's a question of whether it's symbolic in nature. to remind you of the Beit, that you're showing a sensitivity to the idea of the Beit HaMikdash when you go to the bathroom, and not that you're actually defining the exact direction. Because then you're going to have to get your compass out every time you go to the bathroom and figure out...
The Rambam says it's a zecher only.
He doesn't say that, but he says east-west. He doesn't say relative to the Beit HaMikdash.
Which way should you face when you pray?
That east, for sure. That you have to face the Beit HaMikdash. No,
okay, so it should be
that even the Gemara says.
But if these two were supposed to be consistent, then
it would depend. It depends. True. I would say that's the argument of those that say that you do go by the location of the Beit HaMikdash. The way the Shulchan Arukh makes a distinction, the way the Beit Yosef makes a distinction, the Rambam doesn't explicitly justify his distinction, but the way that the Beit Yosef justifies the distinction is by saying that in the case of the bathroom, it's really just a zecher. In the case of tefillah, there's really a concept. I mean, even Shlomo HaMelech says everybody should face the Beit HaMikdash when they pray. So it's really a concept in tefillah that you have to face the Beit HaMikdash. It's not just a zecher to remind you of sensitivity to the Beit HaMikdash when you're going to the bathroom. So it is different, because in one, you're actually trying to connect to the Beit HaMikdash. In the other, it's just a matter of sensitivity and reminding you of the Beit HaMikdash.
In Beijing, we pray to the west.
Yeah, right. Praying for sure. Praying has to be to the direction of Yerushalayim. That's for sure. This is a different halakha where the Shulchan Aruch interprets it instead of being relative to your relative position. Instead of being based on your relative position to vis-a-vis the Beit HaMikdash, it's just east-west. That's how the Shulchan Aruch does it, and we're going to see the Beit Yosef says the Rambam has it that way too. V'chen asur lishon. Oh, and the Rama says in small parentheses there, that just to urinate is not as strict as to go to the bathroom. That's where this halakha of east-west applies. But if it's just urination, it doesn't apply. Now he says, "V'chein asur lishon ben mizrach le'ma'arav." A person should not sleep facing east-west. Okay, im ishto imo, if his wife is with him. V'nachon lezaher afilu kashen ishto imo, and it's good to be careful even when his wife is not with him. In other words, even a single person should try to avoid sleeping east-west. So then he goes on to say, "Hametil mayim min hatzofim v'lifnim," a person who is past harat tzofim, and as the Rama explains in the parentheses here, "Makom shecholim lirot misham harabayit misham v'hala ein yocholim lirot." In other words, he's close enough that he can actually see the Beit HaMikdash. Okay, he's close enough that he can see the Temple Mount. So then, lo yeshev ufanav klapei hakodesh el tzafon daram o yisalek hakodesh tzadin. So then, certainly, he shouldn't face the Beit HaMikdash no matter what the direction is. So see here, he makes a distinction. So in the case before where you're far from the Beit HaMikdash, like you're in Rockville, Maryland, so we use east-west as our rough estimate. But when you're actually close to the Beit HaMikdash and you can see Har Habayit from where you are, there you shouldn't be facing Har Habayit and using the bathroom. And you shouldn't turn around your back to Har Habayit and go to the bathroom in that case. It should be based on your relative position vis-a-vis Har Habayit. When a person goes to the bathroom in a field, if there's a fence there, he goes behind it and he goes to the bathroom. If it's an open place, a person should be sensitive that they not be seen when they go to the bathroom. So even if you're in an emergency and you have to go to the bathroom and you're in an open place, try to go somewhere you can't be seen. Then he gives you some more health rules like lo yeshev b'mhera u'b'chozek v'lo yanos l'tchok atzmo yoter midai. Don't sit down too quickly when you go to the bathroom. Don't push yourself too much. Shelo yinatek shnei karkashta, that you're going to cause yourself physical damage by doing so. Lo yikaneach biyad yamin. A person shouldn't wipe themselves with their right hand. That's actually in the Shulchan Aruch, because the right hand is used for many mitzvot. It has a significance vis-a-vis many mitzvot and vis-a-vis a lot of holy things, and therefore to distinguish between that and a lower activity, we don't use our right hand to wipe ourselves. When you wrap tefillin and you do other mitzvot.
It's weird because you put it on your left hand, but you wrap with your right. You also put
it on your left hand, but the mitzvah is actually done with the right hand technically.
What if you're a left-handed person?
Then you would switch it, I suppose. Yeah, then you would switch it.
Okay.
So you didn't have paper back then?
They didn't have paper. They used rocks or... he mentions here in the next halakha, he talks about what not to use for wiping, like earthenware and grass, things that they found would cause you problems. the Ramah says basically that nowadays our bathrooms are indoors. It's no problem to use any material. It's a sanitary and different circumstance than it used to be in the old days. And a lot of these things that they were worried about using out in the fields for sanitary purposes don't apply anymore. But just to the rest of this, it gets into some more things that are far afield. I just want to at least complete these halachot that we've done tonight, and then we'll finish these off very quickly next time, because a lot of them are quick ones that we can rush through. I just want to mention what the Beit Yosef does say about why don't we nowadays say this prayer or say this statement to the Malachim when we go into the bathroom. That first halakha that we mentioned. So the Beit Yosef says the reason is that the Abu Darham says. The Abu Darham was a late Rishon who wrote explanations of the entire Siddur and all of liturgy. It's actually excellent. His sefer is really, really eye-opening. It's great. He says, "She'en lo marze ella yireh shamayim v'chasid shashechina shora alav." There's a little typo there. It says that a person the only person who should say this is somebody who's a very pious person, that the divine presence rests on him all the time. In other words, that he really feels that he has such a connection with God normally that he has to say, "God, hold on a second, I'm going to the bathroom." But the regular person, I wish, ulavai, that we should be on such a level that even to take a break for 5 seconds to go to the bathroom, that we really feel the distance from God for those 5 seconds. So therefore, he says that's why I shouldn't do it. Aval inish acharina lo. A regular person, no. Mishum de mechzeki Orah, because it looks like you're showing what a great holy person you are, that I am so holy, I can't go in the bathroom without telling angels to wait for me outside. I mean, who do you think you are, right? And it seems that because of this, it has completely fallen into neglect to say this prayer nowadays, because nobody's on this level that they feel that they have the right to do that. There's just one more point from the Beit Yosef that I didn't put on the sheet that I wanted to mention, and it's also relevant, which is about sleeping from east to west. So the Shulhan Arukh said that a person should not sleep from east to west if he's with his wife, and really should not do it even when he's not with his wife. So I just wanted to say one thing, because this is the last point that he brings. Why does he say twice? Why does he first say you can only do it? It's only a prohibition to have your bed from east to west when you're with your wife, and then change it. So it's really interesting where he gets this from and why he changes it. Okay, so he says that v'nir'ah. He says it seems midivrei Rambam she'afilu ha'adam levado asur lishon ben mizrach lema'arav, that even a person by himself shouldn't sleep east to west. Why? Because of kivod ha'shekhinah. Same idea, that how can you sleep in the direction of the Beit HaMikdash? It's an insensitivity to the Beit HaMikdash to do that. Aval Tosafot katvu sham, but Tosafot are the ones that say Kol anotein mitato ben tzafon ledarom velo ben mizrach lema'arav, that V'davka kishiyashen mishto, that they explain, the Talmud says this halakha, that you're supposed to put your bed north-south, that's when you're with your wife. Mibnei sheshechina shora ben mizrach lema'arav, because that's the direction of the divine presence. V'aya davar gnai lishkav etzel ishto mibnei tashmish, and because you're going to have marital relations, you shouldn't have your bed faced in the same direction as the Beit HaMikdash. However, and that's what the Tosafot, he says, V'afal pi sha'olam noagim k'divrei Tosafot, even though the world follows, in other words, the common practice is to follow the Tosafot, that only married people are careful to put their beds north-south instead of east-west. He says, Nirali, Shu mipnei shenam me'aynim b'divrei Rambam. That's because they don't pay close enough attention to the Rambam. That's almost everyone's problem. That is the problem, my friends, with all things. Be'ilchot beit ha'bechira, el echad otre b'dara. Only one or two people in a generation take the time to study the Rambam's halachot they only look at the beginning of the Rambam. The first few books of the Rambam, they talk about spiritual things, Sefer HaMadah, study of Torah, and Teshuvah, and Shema, and Kriyat Shema, and Tefillah, and all that, and Sefer Zemanim talks about Shabbat and Chagim, and all of the things that are practical halakha. Today, they read those parts, but they don't read the Rambam's halachot of Beit HaMikdash, Beit HaBechira. And that's where he mentions this halakha of not sleeping east to west. And he doesn't say only when you're married. He says anybody. He says only one or two people in a generation learn the entire Rambam. And here's the kicker. It's proper to be careful like the Rambam. Shehu amud ha'ora'ah, because he is the pillar of all Torah. And therefore, when he has an opinion, you need to listen. So that's why he first says that the practice is only when you're married, but really a person should follow the Rambam, the neglected view of the Rambam, because he is really the pillar that holds up all Torah instruction and halakha, and we should follow him. And in other places the Beit Yosef will say, because he's the most illustrious, because he's the Rav Muvhak, he calls him sometimes, because he is really our master teacher. So even though in certain cases he'll have an opinion that's a dat yachid, he's the only one that says it, sometimes the Beit Yosef will say, you know what? Even though everybody else is going the other way, we should follow the Rambam because Shu Rav Muvhak, because he is really the master, and he deserves for his words to be assigned greater weight than anybody else's. So you see, even the Beit Yosef had that opinion of the Rambam, Kal V'chomer for us.